Welcome to Technomics, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology and the economy. Hosted by Robin Ituli and Jeremy Nelson, Technomics is brought to you by Insight. The host's opinions, while mostly brilliant, are their own.
Hello and welcome to Technomics. This is episode 5, Privacy Please. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Robin Ituli and I'm here with my co-host, Jeremy Nelson.
Afternoon.
How are you?
I'm doing great, Robin. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
We've got lots to talk about today. A lot of interesting announcements from Microsoft this morning.
Oh yeah, I got up nice and early this morning in my PJs and tuned in. So.
All right, give me the download. What's the recap?
So lots and lots happened. So, obviously Microsoft stepped into the wearable space with their band a year ago. So they announced the successor to that. Obviously that's kind of the big topic of conversation. You got the Apple Watch, you got Google Gear, Fitbit is obviously huge in the space. So, Microsoft definitely stepping up their game. And I've actually been wearing a Microsoft band since launch. I was one of those early adopters and, definitely has some room for improvement. Definitely a generation 1 device, early adopters only type of a situation. But they obviously took a lot of the feedback directly from the community that got in early, and very ergonomic, very cool looking curved glass OLED. Anyway, so very, 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 very fascinating device. Followed up with the next round of Windows phones around the Lumia line, the 950, the 950 XL. One of the big pushes there is that it is running Windows 10. Universal apps are coming, and they have a feature called Continuum, where you hook up to a docking station, and your phone now becomes your day-to-day PC. Super excited about that.
So you could dock your phone and have it on your laptop, or not your laptop, your desktop screens?
Your desktop. They have a 6-core and an 8-core processor in these phones now. So that's a lot of computing power, 3 gigs of RAM, up to 2 terabytes of expandable storage in your pocket. I think everyone could see this coming, right? When the iPhone launched and the way that it changed the way that people thought about computing this was just a matter of time, and it's actually really starting to happen, and it's super exciting. So lots of computing power in your pocket. Now you just have an interface where you hook up to a docking station. Now you have a keyboard, mouse, and monitor. All the processing is happening on your phone, and with the unification of Windows 10 and universal apps, you have an app that now runs on your desktop, your Surface, your tablet, and your phone. It's the same code base, and all it has to do is adjust to the different screen sizes. So pretty cool.
That's really cool, actually.
Yep. I was super excited about that one. That was a fun one to watch. And then obviously the announcement of the next generation of Surfaces, really pretty interesting. And Microsoft has announced their first laptop.
Oh, first?
Their very first laptop.
That's like kind of working in reverse, isn't it?
Yep, it is. So they went tablet first, and then into the laptop space. Obviously, that they felt that their penetration needed to come in the actual tablet space with the encroachment of iPad and iPhones into their key business areas. They've now branched out from tablet into laptop. But the interesting thing is that it's really just a docking station for the new Surface. And so it actually has battery, GPU, all that thing built into the keyboard area. And you dock your Surface, and now it's a very, very high-powered, top-of-the-line laptop.
Interesting.
Very cool.
I'm also hearing that the Surface Pro 4 has an adjustable screen size.
They didn't show anything like that. So I did see that same rumor out there, but they didn't show off anything that would be adjustable screen size. It's bigger, so it's 13.5 inches. So it is definitely an increase in full-on size. There is still a bezel there. I think I saw the same article where it had the zero edge kind of screen like on the Dell XPS, but it still has a bezel, but they did extend it. And I hope I remember the numbers correctly, but I think it's roughly 6 million pixels on the screen. So,
whoa.
Yeah, lots of pixels.
Very cool. Well, the other news, it's more social than tech, but it's about apps and it's about people. That's P-E-E-P-L-E. This is one of those moments in application development and user-generated content where it's not perfect. And
Far from it.
It's
closer to terrifying, actually.
No, horrifying, actually, is probably... It's all of the above. People is an application that is being marketed as Yelp for human beings. So you can rate people on 0 for thinking they are maybe like scum of the earth, or 5 for Nobel Prize winning individual times a million. All of which really just seems like a Pandora's box of no good coming out of this.
Yeah. Knowing our society, how many 5s do you think are going to go out in comparison to how many 1s or 0s?
You know, the adage when it comes to social media is it is just far, far easier to say something negative about someone than it is to say something positive.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like the center of the trolling universe is what this app is.
Yeah. I mean, think about the Twitter wars. Like that, it's just a term that cracks me up, that they're in a Twitter feud. Something that you wouldn't even imagine 10 years ago. And a tool like this, putting into the hands of just the general public, without any vetting, right? It comes back to a lot of just this social or public news cycle, right? You see news, Twitter feeds on your regular news, people going to Facebook to get feedback and input. So this just kind of takes that into an uncomfortable area for me, where you have people who can say anything that they want without any type of vetting process about anybody.
The irony to a lot of this, which I greatly appreciate, by the way, is that the backlash has been really bad for the app creator. And the people who hate that this app was developed and could tear people down are probably the first ones in line to go rate the app developer 0. So I would like to see software and application development that brings out the good in humanity. It's my challenge to the universe.
Yeah, I don't think
apps for good.
I don't think this one falls into that category.
One of the great quotes that came out about this was that the creator said that she would not be shamed into changing the application. But by the time that this podcast is released, I'm sure there will have been sweeping changes to the application and immense amounts of governance that will go into being able to use it, if it still exists at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst part is that if you look at it, and if we, as a society, if we could be responsible and we could, try and look at everyone's intentions in the best light.
You expect a lot.
That is a big ask. I recognize that. But in a perfect environment, it actually wouldn't be a bad thing, right? It'd be a great way to get to know people, get a feel for them, feel for who they are, what you could expect from them. So in the perfect conditions, I could see value in an application like that. But seeing what the world does in the social media space today, there's no way.
Well, it already has a place inside of some other applications. For example, if you use Uber, you can rate the driver and they can rate you. And I love, this also happened I read this just this week as well. We're that same environment where you're being rated as a user. And the quote is, "How are you only a 4.5? You seem like such a nice guy."
That whole half a star.
Yeah.
And now he's like just this terrible human being.
Right. So, it certainly makes you mindful about how you interact with people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is a modicum of good in making people go, I should be thoughtful about how I interact with others.
If someone can rate me on this, right? If my interaction is now going to be public knowledge, maybe, yeah, to your point, maybe you'll think a little bit more and you'll act a little bit better.
But when there's a real consequence to that, like I need a ride and someone might not pick me up if I'm not a good and decent human being in the Uber vehicle, that's a whole different ball game than
you're just a bad person.
Exactly.
You're just as a human being, you just don't really rate very well.
I would love to see some parody accounts to this, though.
Like I said, it obviously has its place, but as a general human rating system, I think it's a fail.
I'm trying to think of some dystopian novel to compare this to. There's one out there. I'll come up with the name later. It'll be like during the middle of a conversation, and I'll just blurt it out, and you can downgrade my rating later because I interrupted.
That's awful. That is so awful.
But these public-facing personas is part of the basis of the conversation that we're going to have a little bit deeper today about what does privacy mean. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Thanks for sticking with Technomics. We are back with episode 5 and on to our main topic, privacy, please. What does privacy mean anymore? This becomes kind of a generational conversation, really a big technological conversation, and also puts some onus on companies and businesses at large who are keeping that kind of information. What does privacy mean to you, Jeremy?
It's a good question. That's exactly what I was thinking too, Robin. I'm like, well, what is privacy, right? For me, I think it boils down to just the ability to select what pieces of my life and what pieces of my that make me who I am are publicly consumable. I think each one of us have parts of ourselves that maybe we don't feel to be the best parts of us that we don't necessarily want exposed to everybody. We deal with them in our own way, and we try and keep those as close to us as possible so that only those who are within that inner circle that we know love us and trust us, get to see some of those things. But then there's the other parts of us that we're comfortable with that we do want to be public. So for me, I think it really boils down to the ability to let me choose what parts of my life are public and private.
I don't even know what privacy is anymore. I mean, I think about it in terms of not if I want anyone to know something, but who I want to know something. So it really becomes a conversation about audience selection. And maybe it's exactly the point you just made about, we keep some things closer to the vest than others. And it's really about how far do you want to extend yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's not that privacy doesn't exist at all. It's that we're controlling the content.
Right.
Because each one of us is a publisher. Mm-hmm. And the degree of privacy is theoretically controlled by us. This becomes a problem if you have no filter.
This is very true.
This also becomes a problem if you have companies using predictive analytics to try and draw very algorithmically defined predictions about who you are.
I think the other side of that as well is that the public recognition side of it too. And this might be more for like younger generations or people, but all of us want to be recognized, right? And the methods of liking or sharing or just the way of that public acknowledgement or validation, I think is a big piece of it too, because it encourages you to share more because you feel that if you get that public recognition and that validation, you're going to be spurred to just go deeper and deeper and share more and more.
What do your kids share that you don't share?
Actually, it's very interesting. So my daughter, I only have one daughter who's old enough to be on, we stick to the agreements say you have to be 13 to be able to have an account. So we actually adhere to that. So we only have one daughter who's actually old enough and she only has an Instagram account. And the reason we
that you follow.
That absolutely. I was one of her very first followers. But one of the reasons that we went that path is because it does highly encourage for private-only accounts where you have to approve everyone to come through. And one of our very first rules around that was she has to know who they are. Obviously, she is, a teenage girl. So one of the most frequently things that she posts are selfies, right? It's just part of her generation. And so we just wanted to feel comfortable with the people that she was obviously interacting through that media. But looking at the things that she shares, she's actually even a little bit more private than, say, my wife, who uses Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook in a totally different way. So it's actually really strange, because I do know lots of other kids her age in her class, and that I'll sit there and watch her flip through her feed, and it's very different. They will share a lot that as a teenager I would never think about posting, but she herself is pretty reserved.
That you may be very, very lucky in that regard.
So far. Now, our second one, she is definitely a much more public and outgoing kind of individual, and she will require a little bit more management, I believe.
Godspeed. So some of the numbers that are out there around how generationally, and I think we oftentimes find ourselves talking generationally when it comes to privacy, but really the concept has changed for all of us. It's the way that we're reacting to it that is so dramatically different. And a 2013 Pew study on teens and social media privacy highlights that 9% of teens were concerned with third-party access to their data.
9%.
Versus 80% of those parents having some concern about it.
Yeah, that's a big swing.
That to me is just kind of a knowledge situation. I feel like there are a lot of people who will have no qualms about it until they have an encounter where they suddenly understand how their data is being used and they have an objection to it. I think I look at myself and I now say, exactly how much do I want to share with you for the inconvenience of being connected to fill in the blank? Mm-hmm. Primarily, that comes down to exactly how many emails am I going to delete from you if I give you my information?
Pretty much.
So it's a real quandary for me as a digital marketer when I myself start to restrict on some of that, because it really, I look at, how do we do business to be effective and share a message without being intrusive? Because that's what people care about. That's what the people that I want to share a story with care about, is me not pestering them.
Yeah, that's got to be an interesting line to walk.
Which is why social media is so important to so many companies, right? Mm-hmm. Then, if we acknowledge clients and customers as gatekeepers to their own audiences, if we're allowed to be in that channel, mm-hmm. that's a really high calling for us to have quality content. And it's necessary for that technology to be a part of the digital business conversation that we create.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing there too is that, do you feel like on social media you get a little bit more true interaction as well, as opposed to just that one way we send something out and it just kind of goes out and there's no real dialogue around it?
I mean, what is there really dialogue around anymore? There's dialogue around vitriol. There's dialogue mm-hmm. around things that really strike at the heart of what people care about mm-hmm. intensely, right? It kind of is back to the people conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really easy to solicit negative feedback. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard to get a positive conversation going. So I guess the answer is not necessarily, which is why you see so many organizations really working towards a social advocacy strategy in mm-hmm. terms of conversation, because there are people in our sphere who are much more likely to engage with people that they know who are part of an organization.
Right.
Than they are to associate themselves with an organization. And it goes circularly back to what I just said, which is even in social media, I'm willing to like a page so that I can get the promotion code for a 25% off. Right. But what am I willing to trade for that? We're trading our privacy for discounts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I mean, think about how much information you put into a social site, right? So Facebook is an example. You fill out your profile. There's a required set of information that when you hit a like button to get that 25% off is now available to somebody.
But what have I just told them in that one simple action? And I think that that's really where, and this is where the onus really turns over to companies, right? They ask for the scope of information to see what is in your universe of likes. So if I tell Facebook that I like Carter's clothing, they suddenly go, you have small children. What other things will you potentially like if you have small children? How can we cross-check that? How can we cross-reference that? And then that really helps them to develop their overarching strategies for making those connections, for creating their marketing strategies, for creating their product strategies.
Exactly. That you were part of their now data points. And you gave that willingly.
But those are all still just no, they're not assumptions though. I mean, it's yes, no.
Exactly. There's no assumption. It's purely just, hey, I'm willing to give this to you. It's that risk versus reward. I'm going to risk my information in order for you to give me something. For you, is maybe it's a 25% off coupon.
I got a great deal too.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what's in it for me. And as well as them, right? I mean, the turnaround is that I gave that away and then I went and spent money with their company.
So that it's actually a win-win for them.
Totally.
And I think the interesting piece is as well is that, I was actually just kind of looking here on my phone that, it's starting to take one step further, right? Where we're now by default opting in for many phones for an advertising ID, right there to your phone that allows direct marketing to come right to you as an individual, right? And that, and obviously there's a lot of speculation here on my part, but that at some point there will be a lot of analytics gathered about me as an individual to ensure that those advertisings sent directly to my phone are specifically things that I have shown some level of interest in.
Or shown proximity to.
Absolutely.
I think too with privacy, there was a lot of conversation about it, especially when social media was on the rise. And we started to see the implications of it, that it wasn't just about your personal life, but it was bleeding directly over to your professional life. And over the years, as I've given this example, it gets fewer and fewer laughs because it's more and more relatable. Or maybe it's the inverse. It gets more and more laughs because it becomes more relatable to more people. But I have a Facebook account that dates back to 2004, and I was in college during that time. There is definitely a picture of me dressed up as Mariah Carey for Halloween. Do you know what I mean? And that's out there, and I'm not taking it down because I'm not ashamed of it. It was a great costume. But, someone's going to come across that someday. Probably my kids.
Probably.
My employer already knows about it because I definitely screenshot it and put it into a presentation. So there's that.
It's all about owning it.
I'm fully transparent. And I guess that's maybe my attitude is I'm kind of speaking for a generation here, but sometimes the best defense is a good offense. So if you're putting that stuff out there and you're in control of it and you're aware of it, is that somehow insular?
I think it's more an awareness. I think what I'm hearing is that you're speaking more about just being aware that what you're putting out there isn't private, right? You're basically saying, I recognize that I'm putting this out there to an audience that I may not understand. And so you're going through that thought process of making sure it's not something that you feel would be personally damaging. Where the exact opposite of that are people, the examples that we've seen in the media of people losing their jobs over what they posted on Facebook. Well, this is private. Well, this is on Facebook. This is my life outside of work. But yet that does have direct relationships back to the organization that they work for, whether they realize it or not. They're representing that company.
Oh, yeah. And of course, we try and have that conversation all the time. And it's, while the adoption of technology is rapid and ever evolving, our mindset around it somehow is not.
Or it actually gets worse, right? I think if you talk about the generational side of this, where, people like myself, Generation X, right? Kind of growing up, not everything was out there. And so when you do get to that stage where you are starting to get on social media, now this is obviously not indicative of everybody, but you are a little bit more leery because you realize you're putting something out into a public space, and you can go back and you have memories of times where that wasn't completely public. But as you know, we're seeing generations growing up where this is just something that's just been part of life ever since they can remember. I think it shifts, right? I think the way that they perceive things and they perceive privacy is different.
Perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to change the conversation to what this really means for businesses. As certainly there's an opportunity, as I have illustrated with my redemption of a 25% off coupon. It's also imperative. Actually, let's rephrase that. The way that businesses will win is by acknowledging how privacy is changing and having a deep respect for users' privacy when they might not recognize the implications and the power of that data collection.
That's an interesting concept, especially if you go back. I think it's been, I can't remember the time frame, but one organization, Microsoft, made it a really big point to come out and say, hey, we know that our end user license agreements and our privacy statements are extremely lengthy. I mean, very long legalese documents.
It's a running joke.
It's absolutely atrocious. But they came out and said, hey, we're going to simplify this. We're going to boil this down and make this something a little bit more consumable. And I think, Facebook's, Instagrams, Twitters, are, because they were born of a different era, they do have a little bit, they've already kind of started that process as well to boil that down. Obviously not perfect, but it's interesting to see that these organizations that hold these tools, I think, are recognizing that relationship has to change, and they have to be upfront with who owns that content, how is it being aggregated, how is it being used, in different ways that maybe aren't within your realms of consent.
Perfect example. LinkedIn is in the midst of a class action lawsuit for the way that it used the get more connections functionality on the platform. So its purpose in doing that is to grow your network. But in growing your network, which it positioned as a service to you, it was extending its database. And the way that it did that was to mine through your contacts and then send emails basically on your behalf, maybe not without your knowledge, or rather, restate that, maybe without your knowledge. And end of the day, you and I could be the happy recipients of about $10 if this whole thing pans out. But that's where, we're all learning together, and the boundaries are being defined as we go along through the judicial system in a lot of cases. I mean, it is actually becoming law. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I think, I read an article about the LinkedIn. It's, it's a potentially multi-million-dollar settlement. So that's not chump change.
The funny thing is as I read that, I wasn't really sure what had changed to the platform in order to accommodate for what was wrong. Because I still see so many prompts to grow my network. But now that I'm aware of the lawsuit, I'm just totally unwilling to participate.
That's interesting, because that, for you individually, right, seeing that, it's actually taking off some of the edge of what makes that tool particularly effective.
I also have a fairly big network at this point. That's not a brag. That is not a humble brag. I have had a profile there since 2007. So, I mean, over time, there's probably more people on my LinkedIn than there is in my contacts at this point. So they may have reached the point of diminishing returns with me.
And that, I think that's true for most social media, right? Is that at some point it just becomes a collection as opposed to a meaningful
connection.
Yeah, meaningful connection. Exactly.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm curious to see how technologies are going to continue changing user perceptions of privacy. I think the wearables conversation is where that really starts to become so personal, right? I mean, people project that, your insurance company will give you a discount if you have a wearable and they're able to track you. I mean, that is intensely personal. I mean, if you participate in that, think of the intimacy that you are inviting an organization who theoretically is there to serve your well-being. I'm making a face.
As long as you're being safe.
Provided you're being safe, yes. I mean, they can't tell what you're doing, but I'm just going to leave it there because that could just go so many directions. And that's not the only one. That's only the ones we can imagine, right? From where we sit right now. But one thing that I hear a lot from the leadership in our organization is just watch the use cases change. We can't imagine what we're going to be talking about next year.
Yeah, the 12-month cycle changes everything.
Before we close our show today, I want to end on a hopefully humorous note, but if I opened a People account today, I think that I would publicly rate you 4.5, Jeremy.
Wow. I'm a terrible person, according to our Uber conversation. And right back at you. I'm pretty sure you're a solid 4.5 in my book, Robin.
It's because I'm always late for this meeting.
But your upbeat attitude definitely makes up those stars.
Oh, my winsome smile, huh?
That's right.
Right. Well, I hope that you keep that account private, and we'll talk to everybody next time on Technomics.
All right.
Thanks for listening. You can find all of our shows on iTunes. Join us next time for another episode of Technomics.